The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. Today's special guest is Dr. Aryn, and she's here to talk to us about healing root experiences through nervous system care. Let's welcome Dr. Aryn.
Hello, Andrea.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great and very excited to have you here. So let's just dive in, and I want you to share with the guests why you do what you do. Why do you focus on nervous system care?
I think like anyone who really pursues their own life purpose or something that inspires them, something they feel passionate about, is probably because they have some direct correlation or link to the work that they are doing now. And that's really where my origin story started. So I was diagnosed with scoliosis, and one thing that I like to share with people is that I've actually unwinded about 50% of my own scoliosis through the work that I now provide for others. So I really focus on nervous system chiropractic care and also helping people rewire those root experiences that they've had that might have actually kept them feeling more stuck in a fight or flight state, or even a freeze and a collapse sort of state. So that's really why I do what I do today, is because of my own story and my own experience with care and how it's literally changed my life.
So I have to ask, just to be super clear for guests that are listening. So you're saying that you have basically fixed your spine 50% by doing this nervous system care. And when you say nervous system care, are you saying you have fixed your spine by adjustments or just by doing brain rewire type work?
I would say a combination of the two. So I was first diagnosed with scoliosis when I was 13 years old. And with that was also a degenerative disc disease, which basically means my spine is aging faster than those who are my age in comparison. And so my first adjustment wasn't until I was 18 years old. And that's a whole story in and of itself. But it felt like the lights were just coming on for me. Those dimmer switches, if you were to take the smallest setting and bring it to full brightness, that was my whole existence. Everything was brighter for me. And so that started to shift a lot of things. And then I went to undergrad. I wasn't very consistent with chiropractic care, as any 18 to 21, any college student would be. That wasn't really my focus. I was probably more interested in the boys and the parties and the, I guess, academics.
But can you go back though and elaborate on that a little bit? Like when you say the brightness went up, what do you mean by that? Like your cognition, your ability to think more clearly? Okay.
Everything. So there's this bone in the top of your spine called the atlas. And it's really named after the Greek mythology, Atlas, who holds a world on his head, because that's really what that bone is doing. It's right there by your brainstem, by your vagus nerve. And so that was the first bone that was adjusted for me. And it literally, my entire world was brighter. Like everything that I was looking at was clear, more vibrant, like through my eyes, right?
Like, okay, you're
like literally brighter.
wow.
And I just remember sitting there, like I could feel the blood flow and like the rush to my head. And I'm like, is this what life is supposed to look like? Like, I'm not even kidding.
Wow. Yeah.
Some people, they have this massive like first adjustment experience, and that was mine. And like when I think about it, I could almost cry. I'm like, how did I live for so many years not experiencing life to this capacity?
Yeah.
Like there's just so much more life. And then on the back end, my headaches were going away, my pain in my body were going away. I had speech impediments, so my speech was getting clearer as well. Everything was just clearer.
What kind of speech impediment? Just because I'm sure people listening might relate to that. Some people are going to be like, oh, well, I stutter. Was it a stutter or?
Yep,
okay.
It was a stutter. When I was a little girl, I couldn't do my THs or my Ls. I call her my sister friend because we've been friends since we were like itty bitty because we were neighbors. And she thought for the longest time that my middle name was Ree instead of Lee. Because I couldn't say Lee.
Yeah.
So I went through like speech therapy, and then the stutter was pretty bad. And then my social anxiety became almost like a side effect of that because I was so nervous to even speak in groups because I'm like, am I going to say things correctly? And even today, when I get a little bit more stressed out, the speech impediment will sometimes resurface because that's really what it's about, is a stress nervous system. Okay. There's too much demand and my body is not able to adapt very well.
When you're talking about all this, all I'm thinking about is my kids. And we went through a big move from one state to another. And my oldest was having like kind of a lot of meltdowns and everything. And so we went to a neuro chiropractor and we had to go 3 times a week for months. But I absolutely saw a difference. Like he did these scans on her so he could see exactly where she wasn't getting proper blood flow. And it absolutely changed her. Like the tantrums went away, like truly went away. It's amazing how much we can change like our personalities just with a chiropractic adjustment. If you don't have that proper blood flow going to your brain, like you could talk more on this than I can, but obviously like just children in general, I think people actually would love to hear about that a little bit. If you can speak on that a little bit, just the blood flow to the brain and behavior.
Yeah, behavior is a huge thing. So I take care of a lot of kiddos, and it's really the understanding that when we are born, we are not born with a fully developed brain, right? Like we have to go through a whole brain development trajectory. And so when I take care of people and they could be in their 70s and 80s, and I'm still asking them about what their birth story was, if they know, right? A lot of people don't know their birth story because that can oftentimes, and even while you're in the womb, like what's the emotional and mental state of mom and dad? Like what's the environment? What are the foods that are being eaten during that time too? What does that environment truly look like? And are we tilling the soil for proper and optimal development, right? And so when we're first born, we have all those primitive reflexes. And we're then going to start moving into like movement and crawling and touching everything. Like you got to make sure that the outlets are plugged up, right? And the doors have like little locks because as we move through development, we're gaining more sophisticated tools. So we are starting to get more independence. And then by the time we're like 2 or 3 years old, that's when our speech starts to come in and we can start understanding language as well. And oftentimes, if you have root experiences before then, that foundation that you've been building up leading up to the speech might be a little cracked and a little fragmented. So by the time you get to the speech, there might just not be enough sophisticated tools in order for the speech to come out more clearly, right? And so for me, like I was a C-section birth. I showed some crawling difficulties when I moved through development. I did not breastfeed. I still had a like rooting or like a sucking reflex that was unintegrated well into like this last year. And so those were like the cracks in my foundation. So by the time I got to the stage of speaking and everything, I didn't have enough tools to really support me in that development state. And so when the demands are higher, you're in school, you're in social settings, and you're being expected to speak or to perform like this
There's
sophisticated
pressure.
tool, there's pressure. And what happens is there's not enough of a stability and foundation. So you almost like move backwards so you can reintegrate and relearn, right? To do the speaking a little bit better. And so that's where you see the tantrums, because tantrums and emotional expression are of younger developmental years. Does that make sense? So you kind of go into like your animalistic lizard brain.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's fascinating too. The C-sections are always fascinating to me, C-section babies, because there's a lot of trauma around that and you don't realize
Yep.
it. And I this was maybe a couple years ago, but I did this meditation, and I walk other people through it now because it was life-changing for me to do this meditation and really look at where I first experienced fear. And you, through this meditation, you're looking at, was it before your birth, during, or after? And it's wild to me, the things that can come up when you meditate. And I had no expectation of this at all, but I was doing it, and it's like the first thing that came to me was during birth. And I was like,
yeah.
I was taken back for a second. And then I was like, well, I was a C-section baby. And I mean, I have to ask my mom about it, but I'm going to imagine that she wasn't super cool, calm, and collected for a C-section. Like, I'm sure she wasn't like, oh yeah, I can't wait, let's do this, So I am sure there were parts of her, because from the way I see it when I'm intuitively and kind of like going back to that moment and looking at it, when I can, because I do believe, like, obviously I'm an intuitive and have those gifts where like I look back at things, and when I look back on this event, I can see her fear, but I took it on too as a baby coming through. And so that was my first experience with fear and how to deal with it, right? And I had no way to deal with it as like a newborn baby, but I took it on. And a lot of people don't realize that our very first time that we experience certain emotions, or all emotions really, right? The fear, happiness, whatever it be, like we wire our brains to experience it that way from there on after. And so it's really important to go back and experience it differently. And so I did do that. I tried to rewatch this birth and try to visualize it happening differently for my mom and for myself, and to change my view of fear in general. It's really interesting when you
I,
go far back.
yeah, I love that you share that, because in my world, we almost call that like the shadow work, because really that experience is like the shadow side. And for me, that C-section, I was trying to come out. Supposedly my granny saw my mom in her birthing position, and she, I think, saw my head, because she was like, oh, she ain't coming out there. I was too big, right, for my mom. And so they did an emergency C-section, which that's also a whole thing. A baby's never too big for their mom. There can be like restrictions, but having that experience, I recognized just recently, like within the last year and a half, probably, that the shadow side of you can't do this on your own, you need help, carried throughout my whole life. Because what will happen is in that C-section moment, they didn't trust that I could come out on my own. And so they said, we got you, we'll pull you out, right? And so that trend, I would try to do things on my own, or I would have situations where I almost collapse, and I was like, well, I need someone to help me. Like, I can't do this. But life is funny. I believe in like universe, spirit, God, whatever you want it to call it, will give you opportunities to heal that shadow side.
Absolutely.
So it's like, how fun. Now my dad laughs because I'm stubborn, right? That's what he shared during his like father speech at my wedding back in December. But I've carried that stubbornness in order to allow for the healing of the shadow side, that I can't do things on my own. And now my life purpose is really to help others walk their own path, because that's exactly what I've done. I almost like called myself the black sheep of my family, because I did everything different. To go to like college, I moved cross country, like I've done all these things. I'm building a whole new life in Minnesota, which feels so random because I grew up in Washington. So like I'm truly walking a new path, because I can do it on my
Mm.
own. And now I get to show others that they can do it on their own too. Or,
And
I
it's
mean, not on their own, but they can create whatever they want.
and it's so fun too when we get kind of triggered and
Yeah.
things aren't just going as
Mhm.
typical. It's like, whoa, like, why am I feeling this way? Not just why am I feeling this way like right now, like what happened to me 20,
Yes.
15, 30 years ago or whatever it be, like what happened to me that's making me feel this way? And like it's kind of fun because then you get to go
Yeah.
back and figure it out. Like what happened? Okay, wow. And then
Mhm.
you're able to rewire that experience and see it differently so that you can take on the world differently. It's really
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah. I like to think of like my practice members or those who I coach as my guiding light, because they are going to reveal the next thing that I get to heal.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes things will come up and I'm like, oh, I feel a certain way. I'm like, what's that about?
So are you kind of going into the whole concept, the mirror concept
Yes.
thing when you say that? Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about that
Mirroring the
for a second?
reflection back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a specific question or just
No,
the notion of it?
just the topic of it. I think not
Yeah.
everybody is familiar with that, and so
Mhm.
maybe share with people what
Yeah.
that is and how they can recognize it.
So, because I'm a nervous system chiropractor, I'm going to tie it to the nervous system first and then speak a little bit about it. From the nervous system perspective, think of your nervous system as your antenna, because really what it is a sensory part of your body where you take information in and then you send it up to your brain, you process it, and then you decide how to respond outwardly.
Mhm.
Okay. So your nervous system is really like that antenna channel. When you're listening to the radio, it's calling out a frequency, right? And
Mhm.
allowing for that really great radio station with the fun hip hop music to come on and you get to jam, right? So
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're attracting in your life is because of the frequency of your nervous system.
Mhm.
Make sense?
Yeah.
That's I think the easiest analogy to think of
Okay.
sometimes. Like that's how I like to think of the nervous system. And
Yeah.
so if there are things that are coming into your life, it's because it's of the same resonance. It's
Mhm.
of similar frequency, right? It's like the notion that you are the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Mhm.
There's a resonance there, right? Can you change
So
that? Absolutely. Can you change your radio station? Absolutely.
but why? Like, why? Explain to people why we draw in the same frequency that we're putting out.
So we often draw in the same frequency that we're putting out in order to heal it, in order to learn to love it.
Mhm.
So like attracts like.
Mhm.
So anytime that you're interacting with the world, you're most likely just drawing in as like magnets. You're
Mhm.
drawing in similar frequencies. Whether you love it or hate it, you are going to call it in, right?
Right.
And if it's something that feels like, I don't like this, I have discomfort with it, then you ask the question, well, what is it reminding me of? Like,
Mhm.
what part is coming to the surface? What resonant energy is this really waking up within me? So I
Right.
think of it with like kids. Kids are really beautiful reflections and mirror back to us of our own wounds, of like
Yeah.
the things that we might not have gotten in childhood. Your friends are going to be people who are going to allow you to step into your own growth and expansion, right? Your
Well,
parents as well. It's all this mirror reflection back to one another.
and they say that the wounds that we don't heal within ourselves, our kids will relive. And so
Yes.
then that like goes into the whole thing of generational trauma too, right? When you have this
Mhm.
generational trauma, some people are like, oh, it's my family. It's just my family history. That's just how it is for our family. Like we're just
Yeah.
genetically this way.
Yeah.
And I do believe that everybody, well, based on all your experiences, everybody kind of gets wired in a certain way. And so some people naturally are black and white thinkers.
Yeah.
And so, right. And so
Yeah.
everybody is wired a little bit differently. We could all essentially probably get wired the same if we chose to. But with all these family things that have happened in your family lineage, it keeps going and going because
Yeah.
you, like you're saying, you have that
Mhm.
frequency and then you
Yeah.
just keep it going with your kids. it is very wild to me when you're listening to people and they tell you about like, oh, this happened to me, and now it's happening to my kid too. And you're like, oh, is it?
Shocker. It's crazy. One thing that I like to really emphasize for people if they're going through like this whole healing journey or just, in that expansion phase is you're going to bring the subconscious conscious. So you can't heal that which you're unaware of.
Right.
And we are programmed, our subconscious is really programmed by our parents, by our caregivers within those first 6 years of your life. And the subconscious programming, I can't remember the actual speed, but the amount of information that your subconscious programs is so much greater than what your conscious mind like filters. Like it's Dr. Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief. He dives into this and it's so beautifully like spelled out where like your beliefs really do determine your health at the end of the day, your expression of life.
Yeah.
And so how do you change your beliefs if you don't actually know what your beliefs are? Because your beliefs are typically subconscious.
Right.
So it's like, how can we almost like dig up the things that we don't think of? There's just so automatic. It's that frequency in which we're operating at and almost bring it to the conscious mind so we can actually heal it and move through it.
Okay. So that brings up a question then. Like, I mean, obviously I know that a lot of this, it's a lot of work. It's not like it's, oh, I'm just going to listen to one podcast and my life is forever changed.
No.
It's all about listening and going, oh, like I want this for myself. I want different. Right. Yeah. But do you have any tips you could share with people on going into your subconscious? Because like you're saying, if you're unaware, you can't change it.
Yep.
Absolutely. So how do we become aware of our subconscious?
So one, read Biology of Belief. If you want to nerd out. But the other answer to that is to just tune in with your body. Every single day, check in, because this is something, if you were to ask me, like, what's one thing, like from a nervous system perspective, that I wish everyone would learn in like grade school? And it's how to breathe into your body and how to actually be in tune, because we've actually externalized and we've outsourced our own health and our vitality, and we don't know how to listen, right? Yeah. And so breath work is a really powerful way to start to open up those communication pathways. And the thing about breath work, one, is that it's free. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't need anyone necessarily to assist you. There are so many videos. I have some great resources as well to kind of like help introduce that for you. And two, it can actually change your consciousness. So your respiratory system is the only organ system in your whole body that you have both unconscious and conscious control over, which makes it pretty powerful.
Yeah.
You don't have to think to breathe, right?
No.
But you in a moment can change your breath.
Absolutely.
You can become aware of your breath. And so I think the simplest things are also the hardest things to do. Right. And it sounds so silly and so simple, but focus on your breathing.
Yeah.
So just taking 5 minutes every day. Where am I sending breath? And where can I allow it to be more effortless?
Yeah.
How can I allow it to be more full body?
And changing your awareness essentially too, right? Because you're like, you're kind of, what I hear you saying is we're living in this very conscious state and always in the same place. So like start to change your awareness and notice other things, notice your breathing patterns.
Yeah.
I love it when you're doing meditations and you stop to just feel the air on your skin. Like that one's always wild to me. It's because you just move through life and you never think about that. Like just sitting and thinking about, oh wow, like I can feel things on my skin. I can feel the air flowing, and it's one way, right? Like start tuning into all these things that we don't usually tune into.
Yeah. And it's trusting your own intuition too. At the end of the day, you are your own best doctor and your own best healer. Like allow yourself the permission to bring your hands to your body, to just explore, like, what does it feel like to connect? What are the feedback loops that I'm receiving in this moment? Like,
Mhm.
what do you know to be true?
Yeah.
And if your first answer is, I don't know, hang out there for a little bit longer, because I
Yeah.
promise you, you do. You just have to
Yeah.
slow down.
Exactly. No, so I talk about intuition all the time and I talk about what it is and tuning into it, but I think it's always great for people to hear from other people because I am
Yeah.
definitely a very big believer in not really listening to somebody that tells you it's my way or the highway sort of thing. Like, this is the way you have to do it. Like,
Right.
it must be done this way. And one of my old mentors, she taught me a certain way to do something, and I've never even told her, but I don't do it that way. But
Yeah.
the way she walked me through it, I do it similarly, but there was some sort of twist that just came to me and it works for me. It works like a
Yeah.
charm. So I feel like you take things with a grain of salt, but also,
Yeah.
lean into it yourself. But how do you like to lean into your intuition and know what is intuition? That's a question I get so much. How do I know if this is my intuition or just like my conscious brain saying whatever?
That's a good question. And I think that's like it's an ever evolving question too, right? Because I think your intuition, it's like a muscle that you get to work out, and
Mhm.
it gets to shift and change with time. When I started to lean more into my intuition, I would use other tools to almost confirm,
Yeah.
so like, is this actually my intuition? Like, can I trust what's coming to the surface?
Yeah.
And it was just like opening up those communication pathways. And so when I actually started doing more nervous system based work and somatic healing, it was trusting the guidance, one, of the person who was, walking me through the care, and then seeing what would emerge and just trusting the thread, right?
Mhm.
And allowing whatever one to unravel. And then in like a very practical sense, I love to adventure and, just explore my own path, right? And so I started throwing out my plans. I like literally just stopped planning things. I went from type A, had to have everything like perfectly planned out, like by the hour, to, you know what, I'm going to drive cross country and I have no idea where I'm going to stop. I have no idea like what's going to happen, but I'm just going to follow what I feel like is meant to happen. I'm going to talk to the people I feel like I need to talk to. And it was a whole surrender. And I think the surrender piece is the hardest, but the most magical part
Mhm.
of trusting your intuition, is just allowing for whatever wants to show up, and then trusting that it's meant to be there.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
now, like, I have enough like tools and bandwidth where when things kind of surface in my mind's eye or even in my body, I kind of trust it and lean into it.
Mhm.
There are other tools that you can obviously utilize. People love like oracle cards and using like pendulums and whatnot to kind of exercise that muscle.
Uh-huh.
Um, I have learned how to locate what is a yes and what is a no in my body.
Mhm.
So, like, is this what I'm meant to do, meant to have? Is this a person I'm meant to talk with or hang out with? What does my body tell me right now? Is
Yeah.
it a yes in my body, or is it hell no?
I think it's like you're saying though, the more you do it, the more your body will quickly recognize how it feels when it's a yes
Yeah.
and how it feels when it's a no.
And that's like the thing where I'm like, what works for me is not going to work for you, and it's not going to work for the other person. So I know I'm kind of like vague in my answers, but it's because everyone has their own unique like zone of genius and makeup and like how they actually interact with the world and interact with their own intuition. So it's going to look different.
Yeah.
And it's like how I work with people. Every single body is so vastly different. So it's like, what is like their unique sauce that we get to
Mhm.
dance with?
And that's where I tell people, go back to a time in your life where you did have that moment of like, "Ah, I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it," because I feel like everybody's experienced it at some point or
Yeah.
another, right? It can be
Oh
something
yeah.
small or something big, but usually somebody has gone through an experience where something happened after the fact. They're like, I knew it. I knew
Yeah.
that was going to happen.
Yep.
So go back to that moment of when you knew it was going to happen. Like, how did you feel? Like, what made you think about it in the first place? Like, walk yourself back through it. Go back from the beginning and walk through the whole experience of like, I had this gut feeling. How did you feel? Like, was it in your gut? Was it in your brain? Like, was it your body was having chills? Like, what were you feeling? And then, prior to the I knew it moment, like, what did you feel? And then get there. So I feel like that can kind of give you a little bit of a clue how your body works and how you can start leaning into your intuition.
Yeah. When you also just like start healing and like building that awareness between like mind and body, no matter where you're at on your journey, there will be little like feedback loops that kind of come up, and people will oftentimes want to like push it away, like, oh, that's so random, like I don't know why I was thinking I should maybe stop eating this. And I'm like, no, trust that, like that's your intuition saying, hey, try this and see what happens. I was just talking on our podcast about like, we can give you, like as doctors, we can give you guides of like, try this, maybe don't do that. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be sustainable unless if it's an intuitive hit from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when that does surface, trust it.
Yeah.
Because it's like peeling back layers of an onion. You're not meant to make these massive life changes all at once. You're going to titrate them through. And it's like one layer at a time, and just allow the layers to unfold as they're meant to unfold.
Yeah. I say the same thing to people with the whole, if it comes out of nowhere, like, why do you think it just pops in your head? Like, so whenever something comes to me that's like really random, I'm like, oh, that must mean something, because I was not thinking about that. There's not been anything recently to make me think about that. Like, that's coming to me for a reason. Okay, I really need to lean into this and figure out why is this thought coming to me. So to wrap this up, what would you say to people if they're wanting to figure out, like, what are their next steps for going through their rooted experiences and healing those? What do you recommend they do? Do they just go to the chiropractor to start and just get the blood flowing properly, or what do you recommend?
I mean, I'm obviously biased. No, first and foremost, I would say, and this is because I didn't necessarily do this, find a community that you feel supported in, no matter what that looks like. Find people who are there to cheer you on, who are able to provide maybe a different capacity, a different frequency for you to step into. Surround yourself with those people, because just being seen and heard in whatever it is that you're experiencing is honestly the most powerful thing. So like I started a women's circle just so people could have that community where they're like, I think something needs to change. I don't feel totally at home in my body. Like things aren't working. I'm like, this is a great place to at least start.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then from there, listen to the intuitive hits. Like, is it therapy you want to go down? I personally love internal family systems, IFS. It's beyond just talk therapy. It's actually looking at the parts of you, like those protectors that might come on board, the firefighters, the managers, because little you is feeling challenged in the moment. The work that I do is called network spinal chiropractic, and it's not just about bones and muscles. It's actually about what your spinal cord is doing in the moment. And so how can we create a sense of safety in the body? And I really, really, really wish people talked more about identifying like nervous system health first, like beyond anything else, because it's really the missing link. It's like, if your nervous system does not feel safe in its own body, then nothing else is really going to shift and change for you. You have to create a level of safety. So whatever that looks like, if it's doing breath work or meditation on your own, whatever feels most accessible, I would start there and then allow the threads to kind of peel back and unravel.
I couldn't have said it better, because it's true. It's this all encompassing thing, right? It's not just one thing. It's looking at all parts of the body. So
because you're a whole being, you're not just a sum of your parts. Like you're not individual parts, you are everything.
Yeah.
And like your whole existence is so, so important, right? So don't minimize it, and no one's ever broken. You are whole. You just have to remember where the wholeness truly exists for you.
And everybody is created differently, right? Which is funny because everybody's like, everybody is created equally. Well, actually, no. Like we're not all created equally. We are all created a little bit differently, right? We are all wired in a different way. And so I think what works for one doesn't always work for the other, like you're saying, right? So like breath work might be perfect for somebody, but not for another person. There may be another way or something that's a little bit better for them. So I think it is important to find and don't give up, right? Like if something's not, don't be like, well, this stuff doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Find whatever it is, because your nervous system can go into the freeze and collapse mode where you actually need more stimulation. So maybe sitting down to do some meditation isn't going to serve you, right? Like you need some healthy sympathetic activation in order to come out and almost like de-thaw, right? Because you've shut down so much. So it's so person dependent. And like for me, I didn't necessarily start my full healing journey until I was like, okay, taking ibuprofen for my pain, like a lot of ibuprofen just to like kind of mask the pain, is no longer serving me. Like I got to do something different. Otherwise my liver is going to absolutely collapse. And like I have a whole family history of like alcohol abuse. So I'm like, protect the liver at all costs, right? And so I made the choice to do something different. Granted, there were some other situations, concussions, injuries, sexual boundary ruptures that were really trying to wake me up to doing something different, but it was really me needing to make that choice. And like my first adjustment changed my life. And then it was a solid 5 years and me being like, I'm trusting my intuition. I want to be a chiropractor, but I don't know where to go to do it. And I'm like just sobbing with my chiropractor. I'm like, where do I go? And he was like, well, I've heard great things about this school, but it's in South Carolina. And I said, well, you're probably telling me this for a reason. So let's trust it, right? Like, let's trust that it's emerging for whatever reason. And so I looked on their website and they had a showcase, like a prospective student weekend in 3 weeks, and they still had spots left. And they paid for my flight out there and paid for my hotel. So I was like, we're going to trust it. We're just going to trust the thread. And I went out there and I was like, holy crap, this feels like home. Like, but I never would have gone to South Carolina on my own if I didn't have some people showing up. They're like my guiding lights. You know, all these people were like my real life angels being like, no, you're doing it. You got this, Aryn, keep going. And so that's why like surround yourself also with people who are maybe people that you see doing the thing that you want to do one day, because the light will be there and you just have to follow it. You just have to kind of surrender. So I moved to South Carolina and then I continued following this thread and I plateaued in my own care. And I'm like, I'm not getting better. And my intern was like, you should try this. And I said, okay, which was network spinal chiropractic, which is what I practice now. And it blew the ceiling away for me for what I thought or even perceived was possible for my life. Who I am today is so vastly different than who I was 5 years ago. And to the degree where I never even thought that this was possible for myself. But it was just little micro moments of trusting the process and just taking one step at a time.
I was going to say, and not being fearful of the moments emerging, because that's what I hear you saying is like, this emerged and then this emerged and then this emerged. And it's like, it's emerging for a reason, right? And look at where you are now. And I think most people that finally arrive to this place where they feel content and happy with their lives, it's because every time something emerged, they didn't push it aside anymore. I think so many people become sick and ill and unhappy with their lives because they're pushing things aside. They just push it down and just try to ignore it and bury it and sweep it under the rug. But really, every time a problem arises, you got to lean into it and follow, like you're saying, follow the thread, figure out why is this here? What is being shown to me that I can do with this to change it, and just keep going.
There are like 4 types of pain that the founder of this work really talks on. In the first type, and like the first level, is the pain of avoiding pain, which is where a lot of people are, where they're just suffering and they try everything to get the pain away instead of actually asking the question, what is this pain trying to show me? And that pain could take on so many different forms. But at the end of the day, like, what is it actually inviting me to listen to and to hear? Because there's some powerful wisdom on the other side, but you have to lean into it.
Yeah. And that's also a big thing too, that I often talk about is questions.
Yeah.
Asking questions, right? Asking those why questions.
Yep.
When something happens, instead of being like, oh, I can't believe this is happening again. Here we go again. I feel like a lot of people say that one too, right? It's like, here we go again. Well, this is just my life. This is what's happening.
Yep.
Take a step back. It's okay to think that. Like, don't continue to beat yourself up over that, right? Like, you thought it's gone. Recognize that, but recognize you can think differently when something comes up. You can go back and think, why is this happening to me? For what reason? How can I change this? Like, ask yourself questions instead of just sitting in it.
Yeah. Ask a different question and you'll get a different outcome.
Yeah. Stop doing things the same, right? Don't be insane.
It's like, how is this actually like serving me in my future? You know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm so grateful for all of the more painful moments of my life, because it's actually created the capacity and the bandwidth for me to hold space for others who are experiencing maybe similar situations or different ones. But at the end of the day, it's heavy stuff that I work with on a daily basis, like heavy stuff. And I could only sit with it and almost guide people through it because I've been there myself.
Exactly.
Like, you can't help people that you haven't transcended yourself, right? So I'm grateful for all those moments and for following the thread, because it's allowed me to show up in the way that I get to show up every single day for people.
And I feel exactly the same, because I've lived through so much. If you watch the YouTube opener, but I mean, I realized, like, I did a quick, I don't even know, 20-minute video on my life, but that's half. That's maybe half. There's so many other traumas and things that I have been through, but I have experienced so many things, not just dying, but so many different health ailments and mental abuse with an ex, and like all these different things that I've gone through. And at the time, experiencing this was like, why is this happening to me? But that was it. That's where I shut the questions off. It was like, why is this happening to me? Oh, poor me. This sucks. My life is so hard. It wasn't a legitimate, why is this happening to me? It was just kind of a like, oh, poor me. Why is this happening? And that was it. I wasn't really open to the answer. I wasn't really leaning into like, okay, truly, why is this happening? What does this mean? What should I be doing with this? But now I am so grateful, because I feel like there's not too many people I can't help if they come to me with some sort of problem in their life, because I've been there and I get it. And like, I can promise you that you can see, think, feel, everything can be different. And so I am grateful for that. And I'm grateful to have you here today and having you share all this wisdom. I'm absolutely loving this. So where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I would say Instagram is probably where I'm most active. So Dr. Aryn Thomas, Aryn, normal spelling of Thomas. That's a great place to reach me. And then from there, I usually share a lot of like what I'm doing, any other like podcasts that we're offering. We do a handful. If like you're ever interested in nervous system care, we do immersions, which are like either a 1 day or maybe a 4-day transformative experience where you get to actually step into receiving care, learning the breath work, learning other tools that you get to like implement. And so it can just be a really powerful all-in sort of experience to really catalyze some change in your life.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to email me, you definitely can. It's just Dr. Aryn, no dots or anything, just Dr. Aryn at inspirelifechirocenter.com.
Well, great. Thank you.
It's the longest email ever.
I don't know. Mine's pretty long too, but thank you so much for being here. And if you like this episode, make sure you click subscribe, like the episode, subscribe to the channel. That way you can catch all the next episodes.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea.
Andrea, Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories.